Right, let's get some analysis now on the relations between United States President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. For this conversation, international relations expert Professor Gilbert Khadiagala joins me. Prof, good to speak to you now. How significant is this public confrontation between Trump and Zelensky for international diplomacy?
The effects are very grievous because it reveals a very significant shift on the part of the United States towards Europe and towards the war in Ukraine. Trump has been from day one tilting very steadily towards Putin's position in the world, particularly on the war in Ukraine. Trump said very recently that it's Ukraine that started the war. So I think going into that meeting on Friday, it was predictable that something bad was going to happen because there has been bad blood between Zelensky and Trump, magnified by Trump's position on the war. And it was therefore predictable that Trump was actually going to humiliate Mr. Zelensky. And they have had very bad blood since the time when Trump was accused by Congress really of trying to push pressure on Mr. Zelensky to investigate the Bidens. And that is 2019. So the relationship has been a very bad relationship. And the confrontation on Friday just underscored the fact that the tilt towards Moscow by Trump is actually real. People didn't think it was that serious when he kept making noises about, Putin is a great guy and all that. So Zelensky, I think, felt very humiliated by that position, particularly since he expected at least Trump to take an even-handed position when it comes to negotiated ceasefire towards the end of this war. He was very adamant that Ukraine has to make the first move. And literally, Ukraine has to surrender to Russia. And I think that's what just annoyed Mr. Zelensky, given he's been fighting from the day Russia invaded Ukraine 3 years ago. So it was a bad moment for him. And I think it was also a bad moment for Trump, because he's now literally abstained from the leadership of what you describe as the Western world. And that's why Western Europe is scrambling now to get a new leader, given that there is an alliance between the US and Russia, demonstrated on Friday.
Professor, a couple of things. And the first speaks to what leaders will disagree at various intervals. But what happened on Friday, do you think that Donald Trump overstepped a little? Did he disrespect Volodymyr Zelensky?
I think the objective was to disrespect, to embarrass, to humiliate Zelensky. And I think it was a setup. And Zelensky was ambushed into positions. Because the question that really sparked the confrontation was when J.D. Vance was asking whether Zelensky was grateful for the U.S. for providing military assistance. And that was really almost a nonsensical question, because Ukraine has been grateful from the very beginning as it has been receiving all this assistance. So to ask that kind of question at that moment was going to elicit the kind of reaction that Zelensky was going to make. So I suspect that it was an attempt by Trump to put Zelensky in his so-called place and to show that the United States holds all the cards. And he kept saying that after the confrontation, that Ukraine has no cards when it comes to ending this war. He has all the cards. And so he used that opportunity to embarrass and to humiliate the leader, because he doesn't really like him. And he doesn't think he can do any business with him.
So we've seen Zelensky with a number of European leaders. Right now, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, even, he had the support and the might of the United States, which largely has been the reason that he's been able to put up so much resistance against Russia. Where does he go to from here?
He's gone back to Europe. He's talking to the British. He's talking to the French, and probably when there is an end to transition in Germany, he's going to talk to the new German chancellor. The European position is the only position now in his favor, because Starmer, the British Prime Minister, is trying to negotiate, to mediate between Ukraine and the United States. And he's spoken to Trump, he's spoken to Zelensky, he's holding a meeting. He held a meeting yesterday with Zelensky, and currently now today there is a meeting of European leaders in London. So the Europeans are going to come in to try to mediate the conflict, because what is needed now is a peace plan that Zelensky can buy into, a ceasefire that the Europeans can provide the guarantees. When he was in Washington, he was expecting that Trump would provide the security guarantees for a ceasefire that is yet to be negotiated. But since he didn't get that, the Europeans now have to put all the money to provide the kind of security assistance that I think Zelensky may buy into. And if they can sell the same program to Trump, I don't think Trump would be an obstruction to the peace process that is initiated by the Europeans. And of course, now he can talk to Putin because Putin is his friend. So it's a very interesting alliances that have emerged. Trump is going to talk to Putin about how to end that war. And Zelensky is now going to talk to the Europeans so that they can come up with some compromise on a ceasefire, on security guarantees, and of course on a permanent peace deal for Ukraine.
Now, there's a small matter of the rare earth minerals, right, that the U.S. wants from Zelensky. What happens to that conversation?
You see, the agreement was already, there's an agreement that was ironed out in Kyiv between U.S. officials and the Ukrainian officials. It started when the U.S. was trying to push Ukraine to give up most of its critical minerals. But before Zelensky went to Washington, they had reached some agreement. So he had that agreement in his pocket. But the problem is when you had that confrontation, when you had that meltdown, Trump just told Mr. Zelensky to get out of the White House. So that agreement has not been signed. I suspect that after a few weeks of reconciliation talks by the Europeans, I think that agreement will be signed, because it's pretty much what the Ukrainians wanted. They want an American presence in Ukraine around those minerals. So it's also a form of guarantee, because if you have Americans prospecting for all these minerals or rather exploring these minerals in Ukraine, they're unlikely to be attacked by the Russians. So the Ukrainians have a larger stake in that minerals agreement, even though a lot of people believe that it's actually very disadvantageous to Ukraine in the long run.
Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, international relations expert, appreciate your time unpacking for us that issue around the relations between, the soured relations between Vladimir Zelensky and the US President Donald Trump, which have soured in recent days.